I had been working as a pizza delivery driver for about 6 months, and to that point, it all had run pretty smoothly. I had taken turns doing the different jobs within the business, and in all honesty, I was really starting to enjoy it. It was a Friday, and business was booming. The phones never stopped ringing, and orders were coming in left and right. I had a few close calls while out on the road, but I managed to make all of my deliveries on time. But then, around 10 p.m., I got a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was raspy and low, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Hello," I said, trying to sound friendly and professional. "Hey there, I need a pizza delivered to the old abandoned house at the edge of town." I hesitated for a moment. First, having a pizza delivered to an abandoned place, it just didn't make sense. And two, this specific house was infamous in our town. It had been vacant for years and no one knew why. Rumors had circulated for decades about what had happened there, from a murder to more supernatural occurrences. But I needed the money, so I took the order anyway and later headed out. As I was driving, the weather took a turn for the worse and a storm had picked up when I had gotten to the abandoned house. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the dark and creaky porch. I hesitated before stepping out of my car and making my way to the front door. When I knocked, there was no answer. Big surprise, it is abandoned. But I knocked again louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to leave and put it all on as a prank when I heard a faint whisper, "Come in." I hesitated for a moment, but then reminded myself that I was probably just being paranoid. It was nothing more than a harmless pizza delivery. Nothing more. I opened the door and stepped inside. The house was dark and I couldn't see much, so I called out, "I've got your pizza." But again, no answer. As I made my way further into the house, I noticed something strange. There were no lights on, but there were candles scattered throughout the rooms. It was as if somebody had prepared the house for a ritual or a seance. And then I heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor. And my heart racing, I called out again, "Is anyone there?" Silence. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand on the railing trying to steady my nerves. When I reached the top, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a circle of candles on the floor, and in the center of the circle was a woman, dressed in all black with her back to me. She was chanting something in a language that I didn't recognize. I backed away, trying to be as quiet as possible, but then she turned and locked straight on me. Her eyes seemed black as coal and her face was twisted into a sinister grin. At this point, I didn't want to be the cliché horror movie victim and get caught up in it, so I took off down the stairs as fast as I could, not stopping until I was back in my car. I drove away from the abandoned house as quickly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I was shaking and sweating, my mind racing with what I had just seen. When I got back to the pizza place, my coworkers could tell that something was wrong. They asked me what had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. I didn't want them to think that I was crazy or making it up. But I knew what I had seen, and it still haunts me to this day. I don't know, even some creepy woman running a seance, I guess she gets hungry too and just wanted some pizza. But I wasn't going to be the one to deliver it to her. I don't even know why I made it that far in the house in the first place. I should have just left after nobody answered when I called. But hey, what are you going to do? Since then, I've still been working at the pizza place, but I tend to ignore any creepy deliveries that come through. I'm not going to make that mistake again. A little bit of backstory. I had just finished high school and had recently turned 18 when all of this occurred. I was looking forward to starting university, and was going to move out of my parents' house into student housing closer to the campus. As a result, I started looking for a job closer to my residence. I found one about a 5-minute walk from where I was going to be living. and it was perfect for me. I was to be a barista in a tiny little coffee kiosk on one of the coolest streets in the city. This street was sort of known for prostitution and drugs, but it was also super popular as it hosted some of the most interesting events and also contained some of the nicest thrift stores in the city. What was even more ideal about my new job was the fact that I worked right across the road from my best friend. Let's call her Phoebe. At the time, Phoebe was in love with her job. She was actively being given more responsibilities and she was being promised the world by her employers. Many of these promises turned out to be false at the time, but that's another story. During one of her shifts, Phoebe was approached by a man who had seemingly become a regular at the place that she was working. We'll call him Richard. He told her that if she ever wanted to leave her job, he had just become the manager of a new restaurant a little ways down the road. Phoebe kindly denied his offer. He approached her several more times with this same offer before she recommended him our other close friend. We can call her Mia. Mia was hesitant to take the position at first because she had a passionate hatred for hospitality and greatly prefers retail, but she did need the extra money at the time and she took the job. The day that Mia was signing her contract, Phoebe and I both finished work early around 4. So we told Mia that we would meet her at her new job once we had finished, and then we would go and do something after. Phoebe and I went to the cake shop next door and sat outside her work while we waited for Mia. When they finished, Richard followed Mia outside to come say hi to Phoebe. The girls introduced him to me and a conversation ensued. He seemed like a friendly guy, if not a little bit awkward. He was late 30s, early 40s, bird-like in appearance, quite short, balding, larger in size, and he seemed very greasy. As the conversation continued, I began to tease Mia a little bit as friends do. I saw no harm in it, as she was one of my best friends and she had made a similar joke at my expense prior to this interaction. Richard's demeanor suddenly seemed to switch. He became somewhat catty in defense of Mia. He retorted back that if I was going to be mean to his staff, that he would bar me from every store in the street that we worked on. This seemed ridiculous, but he claimed to be friends with the security guard that worked in the street. I actually was friends with this man, and when I asked him about it, he told me that he had never heard of Richard before. Richard said these things to me as though he was joking, but he was so persistent about it that I got incredibly uncomfortable and I wanted to cry. It was from this interaction that he nicknamed me Trouble. I also feel it needs to be noted that he didn't scold Mia or Phoebe at all for the same behavior. Phoebe sensed my discomfort and told me that we had to leave as we had plans. Flash forward a few weeks and Phoebe and I decide to go see Mia at work again. Richard intrudes on our conversation yet again, and again he singles me out from the group, teasing me and only referring to me as Trouble. This time, I just play along as I can tell it isn't going to stop. He asks Mia if she is after another job as he needs someone to clean his home, and lives all the way out to where my parents and Mia live. Mia tells him that she can't as she already has too many responsibilities, but I tell him that I might know a few people in the area that might do it, and I give him my phone number. Richard takes this as a sign that I have agreed to do it myself, and begins texting me incessantly about setting up a meeting. This man is much older than me and lives alone in a rural area. Suddenly, my instincts kick in, and I try to get out of it by telling him that I can't drive. He says that he can pick me up from the nearest train station. I don't want to come across as impolite or have my best friend's boss resent her because of me, so I make the mistake of agreeing. However, I tell him that my sister will be helping me as she is looking for a part-time job, and my dad will be dropping me off. I do this in order to have some backup and so that my dad knows my whereabouts. Richard goes on to complain about how I don't trust him, and claims that his house is very small, and the $100 that he's going to pay me won't be enough to split with my sister. I tell him that I just want to provide her with work experience, and finally agrees, asking how old she is. My sister is 17. Richard and I finally find a time that I am not working to schedule a meeting. This meeting is held at his place of work, and I feel a lot more comfortable sitting in the main restaurant surrounded by people, as I thought he was going to hold a meeting in an office. We begin talking about the responsibilities of the job. He tells me it'll be basic things like tidying up, vacuuming, the usual. I agree, and he then goes to tell me that he will also be expecting me to do his laundry. I think this is a bit odd, as he's only paying a small amount for such a large job. He assures me his house is small and not that messy, but continuously claims it just needs a woman's touch. I nod and ignore the fact that this grown man thinks that, just because he's a man, it means he doesn't need to know how to maintain his own home. Now, this is where things start to get creepy. Near the end of the meeting, he asks me again how old my sister is, and when I say 17, his face drops. He then starts telling me about how he previously posted this ad on Craigslist, and this 60-year-old woman replied offering to do it in her lingerie. He tells me how he didn't even ask for that in the ad, but she had offered and he was put off completely. He then proceeds to tell me that he would be willing to pay more to someone between the ages of 18 and 30 if they were willing to do that, but he would never request that because he's not a pervert. I call BS at this and tell him then and there that this meeting is done, and that I have to go and meet Phoebe. He asked me if he had made me uncomfortable. Well, yeah, you did, but I say no on that. I'll get back to him. This strange man, who I have only met 3 times, then attempts to hug me, but I ignore it and awkwardly wave goodbye from less than 3 feet away. I boost it down the street to Phoebe's work and tell her the whole story. She tells me that I can't do it, and I tell her I know, but I don't know how to tell him that without risking my own safety or me his job. Fortunately, Richard gives me the perfect out. He texts me later this afternoon telling me the hopes that I am okay with cats because he is a small one. I see this as the perfect opportunity and lie to him, telling him that my sister and I are both deathly allergic, and neither of us will be open to doing the job. Richard accepts this reasoning after a little persuasion, and I think that I'm finally done with him. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Richard proceeded to text me every day asking if I'm mad at him, or if he had made me uncomfortable, asking me how my day was and so on. Just behaving like a preteen in a new relationship basically. And the more that I ignored him, the more he texted. I finally blocked him in March of 2019. This escapade had begun 4 to 5 months prior to this. The blocking didn't stop him though. Mia informed me that Richard was no longer going to be working there, as he had to go in for surgery and we wouldn't have to see him anymore. You see, Richard hadn't only been harassing me, but Mia and Phoebe too, just to a lesser extent. One Saturday morning while I was working, setting up at around 7:45, Richard showed up at my work. The divider was down as we were closed, though he came and stood in the doorway, the only exit that I had available to me at the time. He started asking me why I was ignoring him and telling me about his surgery. I told him that he wasn't allowed to stand there as it was a fire exit, but he didn't budge. Fortunately, my boss showed up shortly after and told Richard that he was going to phone the security if he didn't move. My boss was kind of an ass on most days, but holy crap, was I grateful for him that morning. Roughly a month after that experience, I thought Richard was gone from my life. I was living in my new apartment. Mia was around all the time and loved her job without Richard there. Things were going well for us. One morning after a night of drinking, me and the flatmates became peckish. I decided to order us some greasy food on a food delivery app. Lo and behold, guess who our delivery driver is? Yeah, Richard. I turn to my boyfriend at the time and tell him that he has to go collect the food. He doesn't understand, but Mia assures him that it's important. He agrees and goes out to collect it. Richard is not driving the vehicle he claims to be driving in the app, and at first we're confused. Plus, the number plate is also different. Mia and I watch from his bedroom window, and the interaction takes much longer than expected. He comes back and we ask what took him so long. He tells us that Richard refused to give him the food until he could prove that he was my boyfriend. He had recognized my name from the app and now he knew where we lived. Me and I tell my flatmates the story of what happened, and we all agree that it's a good idea to go to my RA. The RA reports it to upper management, and they say they can't really do anything about it, but if he comes in again, to call their security. A few months go by and there are no Richard sightings until I order from the same app again. Yet again, Richard is our driver, and yet again in a different car. I send my boyfriend to go collect the food again and report the incident to my RA again, and the food delivery app. I know that I was stupid in not immediately reporting it to campus security, as I had much more proof of the creepy behavior than he had of his innocence, but I was naive, and I didn't want my parents to find out about it at the time. Fortunately, I haven't seen Richard since then. This is actually my stepmom and her best friend's story. I have my own, but I'm so hesitant to drag some of them up. I'm hoping telling someone else's will open me up to a little more. My stepmom didn't like us much, but she told my sister, 3 years older, and I this experience growing up to scare us out of being stupid. It was my family's stranger danger story. My stepmom, we're gonna call her Macy, grew up as a kind of privileged teen in the 70s. And her mom had moved with her family over here, the States, from England when she was about 9. She went to a pretty nice high school and a really nice town. There, she made friends with a girl, Lily, who didn't exactly run with Macy's type of crowd. Popular, stereotypical, etc. They really hit it off, and Lily would take Macy out to do her type of stuff. Hiking, fishing, sailing. There's even a hilarious set of pictures of them camping. And my stepmom has raccoon eyes and it looks like she's hating everything. Anyways, because of Louie's influence, the two of them would do stuff like that a good amount. One Sunday, they decided to go hike in some hills about an hour away. Macy put on what I'm sure were her extremely expensive hiking shoes, and the two of them drove off to the hiking trails. Lily parked in this big clearing with makeshift parking spots. You know, like a piece of wood marking the head of a space. But there were no other cars there. This was only important in hindsight. They started hiking up the hill, off the path because Lily fancied herself as something of a badass. The hike was nothing extraordinary. If you asked my mom, she would just lament for 15 minutes how sticky and buggy it was. Anyways, they reached the top of the hill and my stepmom was done. The polished, pampered side of her was coming out and she groaned into Lily and begrudgingly said okay. They would rest and then walk down again, slower. They had been heading down the hill for maybe 10 minutes when Macy started bitching again. Lily conceded to walking down the side of the road instead of the rough hiking trail. So there they are, probably looking like a couple of tools geared up for hiking, and walking down a crappy road. And after not even 5 minutes, a truck pulled up next to them. It was red and rusty and just generally looked like a clunker. The guy driving rolled down the window and the girls looked in through the passenger side window. He had a big beard, a baseball cap pulled down, and long brown hair. He greeted them and even smiled through his beard, asking if they needed a ride. Macy described him as charming and even cute. Lily still says the moment he greeted them, her hackles went up. Despite her better judgment, my stepmom convinced her to get in the truck. It must only be a 10-minute drive down to the car, tops. The two girls opened the passenger's door to this rusty old thing, and the guy directed them behind the seat to get in the back. They settled in and the truck started rumbling forwards. Lily always says that was the point it hit her what a mistake they had just made. The back seat was clean enough, but there was a rope on the floor behind the driver's seat, and 4 boxes of saran wrap half hanging out from under the passenger seat. It seemed creepy and weird, but Lily didn't want to freak out my stepmom, so she just kept her mouth shut. After 10 minutes, the woods didn't look any clearer, and they hadn't seen another car the whole time. Lily asked how long he thought it would be, and he said he was taking a different route down the hill and had to stop somewhere to get something first. That was it. The girls were 16 and 17, and Lily didn't want to press the issue. She was scared. She can remember his hair because she was sitting behind him. He looked like a woodsy guy, but his hair was super tangled and dirty. She noticed crusted mud on his collar and tried to find something identifiable about him, but just got scared the more she picked up on little details. He was youngish, strong-looking, and had a foot on both of them, so they didn't ask any more questions, and he didn't offer any information. They just drove on. Several minutes after that, they reached a tiny shack, log cabin, looking like place right there in a clearing of trees. There was an old stump where someone had been chopping wood, and a huge axe stuck into the log. Lily was definitely on red alert now. The guy turned off the truck and slipped out of it saying, "I'll be right back, don't go anywhere," and he disappeared into the house. Lily tried to talk to my stepmom about how she was incredibly uncomfortable, but she mostly just dismissed it. Lily started begging, increasingly freaked out, and finally put her foot down, demanding Macy exited the truck with her. And so they got out and walked around the front of the vehicle. The house was about 50 yards in front of them. Why this guy would have left 2 young girls in the truck alone while going into the house is beyond me. And they wandered around looking at it hesitantly. If this guy really was decent and just trying to give them a ride, it would be super rude just to run off, right? My stepmom had this strict upbringing when it came to manners and a public persona, and she saw it as an issue of that nature. So she actually started to head back to the truck, opening the front door to climb in behind the driver's seat. Lily was pissed off and followed her to yell some more. On the driver's side floor, half hidden under the seat, there was a big hatchet. It had dried, red-brown stains covering the blade and stuck to the floor under it. Lily understandably lost her crap after seeing it, and my mom started getting hysterical. They decided that leaving was by far their best option at this point, and just booked it off the side of the property into the trees, until Lily was fairly confident they were on their way back down the hill. My stepmom cried all the way down. Lily felt bad about it, but was also completely freaked out that he would hear it and kept trying to calm her down. When they finally got back down to the bottom and saw the old wooden fence that surrounded the original parking area, they were relieved. But as they got closer, they saw it. The truck. It was parked on the other side of the gravelly makeshift lot, just sitting there, facing the other way innocently. They couldn't see if anyone was in it, and of course, Macy wanted to run for the car, but Lily was super hesitant. She managed to calm my stepmom down, saying that she wanted to wait before running out into the open to see what was out there. Remember, this is in the 70s, there's no cell phones, there was no ranger station or anyone around. The parking lot was big and empty and open, and who knows what would have happened if they decided to stroll across it. Thankfully, Lily convinced my stepmom to chill, and the two of them hunkered down against a big tree, hidden by bushes and other trees, and waited it out for what seemed like to be a couple of hours, when dark started to fall. All the animals started coming out and making noises, and my stepmom predictably started getting antsy about this and bothering Lily, who was tired and moments away from giving in. She was planning her dash to the car when they heard a clunk. Across the twilight-lit lot, they watched as one of the back doors of their car swung open, and the bearded guy slid his way out of the back seat. He got out, shut the door, looked around at the surrounding woods for several moments, and then walked back to his truck. The truck lumbered past their car and out of sight. Several minutes after watching him drive away, they sprinted to the car as quickly as they could, jumped in and peeled out before they'd even shut the doors.